What up? What up? How are we? How are we? Post Christmas. I think my last one was post Christmas, right? Was I wearing the Santa hat? I don't think I was. Either way, this is still post Christmas, pre New Year's. I don't know if we're gonna have a video of this format come out before the new year. So this could be the last podcast of 2024. My name is Rodney. If you knew that already, thank you so much for coming back and watching another video. We got a jam-packed thing here today. We got a lot of things. I'm looking at my notes right now. There's a lot to discuss. There's going to be time codes at the bottom if you want to skip and jump around. If you want to start one place, go to another. It's a la carte, baby. It's the buffet. It's whatever you like to listen to. We're going to get into the Mike Vrabel of it all. We're going to get into maybe a quarterback that we could be drafting that's not specifically on the radar right now. We're going to talk about the Saints game that's coming up. Unless you're watching after the Saints game, then you can skip that entirely. And we're going to read some viewer comments. I do that every podcast. So I take 2, 3, or 4 of the best and brightest comments from last week's episode, or not last week's episode, but the last episode, and I read them aloud in this video, in this podcast, and I will be doing that again with this one. So make sure you guys are commenting away so I can read those in the next video. Before I get into the first topic, which will be Mike Vrabel, I think so. Yeah, it's going to be Mike Vrabel. Here's what I need for you guys to do. Make sure, like I said, comment, drop likes, but hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 12,000. Can we get to 12,000 within the next month? Only time will tell, but about 50-ish% of you that are watching are not yet subscribed. What are you waiting for? You keep coming back, so just hit that subscribe button. So now that we got all the housekeeping out of the way, let's have some fun and talk about Mike Vrabel. Now, I'm going to do a separate video at some point, probably right before the last game of the year, listing my top 5 head coaching candidates. Now, Antonio Pierce could be somewhere on that list. And at the end of the day, if he doesn't get fired, then that's a complete waste of time, which is why I'm going to wait and see what the buzz is and what the rumblings are. But either way, that video is going to be coming out soon. I will spoil my number one choice. My number one choice is Mike Vrabel. And we're going to talk about him compared to AP. We're going to talk about the OCs that he's had in the past and why it's very important for him to get another good OC. And there's an interesting wrinkle to this all. And I'm going to go over here to an article that I have pulled up about Pat McAfee on RaidersBeat.com. Did I say about Pat McAfee? About Mike Vrabel. It's sourcing or citing Pat McAfee's show. And you guys are going to know what I'm talking about in a second. This article was 2 days ago, December 26, 2024. The title is Pat McAfee co-host, Word on the Street is that Mike Vrabel is focused on one NFL destination, which is very interesting. So I'm going to start reading this and we're going to break it down. Mike Vrabel has been linked to the Raiders as potential replacement for head coach Antonio Pierce, but there is a lot that would have to happen to make it a possibility. First of all, Antonio Pierce hasn't been fired yet, and there's still a chance he'll be retained next season. We will get into that in a couple minutes. In the case that Pierce is fired, and after this season, are we sure the Raiders would be Vrabel's first choice? Now, when Orlovsky, and I'm going to get into what Dan says here, said this, everyone thought it was one team, and now it might be another team. So we're going to get into this. Ready? Vrabel is expected to be one of the hottest coaching candidates after this season, and I read a report that said he is the number one choice above Ben Johnson, and we'll talk about that too. And the Raiders are not considering by many to be the top destination for coaching candidates. Last week, that's weird, whatever. Last week, ESPN analyst Dan Orlovsky talked about Vrabel's interest around the league and He said he believes the former Titans head coach is already leaning in a direction for his next head coaching gig. And this is a quote. I think Vrabel is spoken for, Orlovsky said on the Pat McAfee show. And then here's another quote. I think Vrabel has got a clear path to where he is going to be coaching likely next. I think there is a vision for where he likely ends up coaching. I'm not a reporter. I've come on your show before, and I've said I've heard something, and it got me in trouble, so I'm not going to do that. Orlovsky wouldn't say which team he was referring to, but one of McAfee's co-hosts said that week that he thinks he knows the team. And here's the quote. Word on the street is that Vrabel wants to coach at one place. That is very real. Allegedly, Vrabel is interested in being the head coach of the New England Patriots. I believe that is who Orlovsky was talking about when he said Vrabel might have a place already. Okay. So that would be heartbreaking to somebody like me and to a lot of Raider fans out there in the world that want Mike Vrabel to be the next head coach. And there's going to be a through line basically in this whole podcast of us versus the Patriots in the offseason, because we've got similar cap space, we've got similar rosters. They obviously have their quarterback in place. We're about to get our quarterback, whether we draft one or sign one in free agency. And we seem to be the two teams that are really in the mix for Vrabel. Now, last week I said it's a little concerning to me that the Raiders are not in any of these rumors in terms of us looking for another head coach. And I kind of talked myself off the ledge because the teams that were rumored to be looking for coaches, the Bears, the Jets, and the Saints, all have interim head coaches. So it doesn't really make sense for us to be in that rumor mill. However, since I've uploaded that, there's been nothing but smoke and fire and rain and wind and everything about us looking at Vrabel. Now, when I stumbled upon this article and it said the Patriots might be the team Orlovsky was referring to, I thought that was very interesting because in my humble opinion, and look, my best friend is a Patriots fan, and he said as much about things that he's heard on podcasts that the Patriots, are the subject of. I don't think Gerard Mayo is going to get fired. I don't think he should get fired. Their roster is not very good, and they were clearly right about the quarterback they selected. I think at the very minimum, he should get one more season. Now, you might be saying the same thing about Antonio Pierce. The only difference is we don't have the quarterback in place, and we have shown like little to no energy in a lot of these football games. And the Patriots, they've had some ups and some downs, but in my mind, if I just close my eyes and I imagine Gerard Mayo or Antonio Pierce being fired, I see it being Antonio Pierce. Now, maybe there's a world where they both keep their job, and maybe there's a world where they both get fired, in which case Mike Vrabel might have to pick between the two. Now, you might be saying, well, he's not going to pick us if that's the report going around, whatever, right? Here's the continuation of the article. If the Raiders know already that they are not Vrabel's preferred destination, there's a chance they may be inclined to stick with Pierce for another season. That doesn't make any sense to me. Whatever. In theory, it should be considered a good sign for Pierce if Vrabel is focused on a return to New England, or anywhere else for that matter. However, the New York Post's Brian Costello believes the Raiders are the team Orlovsky was referencing a week ago. And then this is a tweet from Raiders Beat. Not so fast with the Mike Vrabel to the Patriots rumors. With the Tom Brady connection, insiders say Raiders are the team to watch for Vrabel. And Hondo Carpenter, one of the insiders, has said that for a long time he believes that Vrabel will be the next head coach of the Raiders if/when Antonio Pierce is fired. Look, I get being hesitant to fire somebody if you don't have the succession plan in place. But you have to understand, if you're Mark Davis, if you fire Antonio Pierce and you don't get Mike Vrabel, or you're not guaranteed to get him right off the bat, you have to understand something. You are interviewing head coaching candidates. They are selling their vision of your team, and they're pitching the future of the franchise to you. But that's not all that's happening. You now, Mark Davis, Tom Telesco, Tom Brady, Richard Seymour, Marcel Reese, who's ever in that room interviewing people, are also pitching the franchise back to the coaching candidates. So if you're not going to fire Antonio Pierce because you think Mike Vrabel's not going to come here, or Ben Johnson's not going to come here, and we're going to have to settle for Liam Cohen, then you're not confident in your ability to sell potential head coaching candidates on this franchise. Now, I read in that article that the Raiders are not the top destination. And I understand why maybe the Bears would be the best destination, assuming Mike McCarthy keeps his job. Because you have Caleb Williams, right, who's had a pretty okay season for how up and down that team has been, mostly down. But after the Bears, how are the Raiders not a more preferred destination than the Jets? An absolute cap space and player development nightmare. The Saints, who have, again, no real quarterback and no stability, right? They gave Dennis Allen 2 years and he's gone. Who else is going to be available? Stefanski's not getting fired. We know Mike McCarthy at this point is not getting fired. What is another team that you would say, I'd rather coach for this team than the Raiders? The Raiders, at the very least, on their roster, have blue chip all-pro type players like Wilkins and Crosby and Bowers, and they have some other complementary pieces like a young DJ Glaze and JPJ, like a Jacoby Myers who's a solid wide receiver too. It's not perfect in Las Vegas, and they don't yet have their quarterback in place, but neither do the Saints, and neither do the Jets. Now, if we were picking first overall, I would argue that we're a more preferred, better destination than the Bears. And now that I think about it, if Brian Daboll's fired, the Giants might be a better destination just because they have neighbors and the first pick in the draft. But after that, I do think the Raiders is a place that's being a little undervalued in terms of if a coach would want to coach there. But again, I go back to the Mark Davis of it all, being afraid to fire Antonio Pierce because we're not going to be able to get this specific guy. I don't think that bothers him in the slightest. I do think Mark Davis, in terms of letting the GM and coach do what they do for the most part, he's pretty hands-off. We're going to get into where he might be a little hands-on in a second. But for the most part, he is hands-off, and I do think that's another valuable asset in terms of coaching in Las Vegas versus coaching for the Jets, where your owner is meddling in everything that you want to do. Now, here's the thing. If that rumor of Vrabel to the Patriots is true, it all comes down to Gerard Mayo. If he keeps the job, then I believe we are in line to hire Mike Vrabel. If he doesn't keep the job, then maybe it's a 50-50 chance, and Brady's going to have to work his magic. I can understand why Vrabel would want to go to the Patriots over us because they have the quarterback in place, and that's where he played before. But Tom Brady, I would imagine, similarly to a Magic Johnson for the Washington Commanders, has a lot of pull and a lot of sway. Now, let's just say hypothetically, we do fire Pierce and hire Vrabel, which would be the move. I mean, if you compare the two of them, it's not close. Mike Vrabel has won Coach of the Year. His worst year in Tennessee is better than this year, right? His worst is better than Antonio Pierce's worst. He was in an AFC championship game at Arrowhead, and they were up multiple scores. Like, these are just facts. I love AP for what he did last year, a Raider through and through, but it hasn't worked out, and I'm ready to move on. Defensive-minded head coaches need good offensive coordinators. And if you look at the history of a Mike Vrabel, when he got to Tennessee, the first offensive coordinator he hired was Matt LaFleur. Ever heard of him? He's had a pretty good head coaching career since then with the Green Bay Packers. After Matt left, Arthur Smith was hired. And immediately after Arthur Smith was hired, they had another great season offensively, and Arthur Smith became a head coach for the Falcons. Didn't work out, but now he's credited with resurrecting Russell Wilson and turning the Steelers into a legit contender. After Arthur Smith left, Mike Vrabel went for Todd Downing. And that was the beginning of the end. He was 2 for 2 and then made the worst mistake you could, giving your offense to Todd Downing. We all know how that worked out in 2017. That was the beginning of the end for us. We have yet to recover. So, if Mike Vrabel is going to be the next head coach, we need to do our due diligence in finding the next great Las Vegas Raiders offensive coordinator. Might already be in-house. I really have not disliked anything that Scott Turner has done. When you watch these games, especially with Aiden, there isn't that complaint we had about Luke Getsy where it's like, what are we doing? The offense looks okay. And I think Scott Turner with a better quarterback could be a very good offensive coordinator. However, I've said before, I think there are two options that could be better. Now that I think about it, I don't think Mike McDaniel is going to get fired. But if he did, he would be a pretty cool option to have with Mike Vrabel. But assuming he doesn't get fired, Wes Welker is the wide receivers coach and offensive assistant / passing game coordinator for the Miami Dolphins, who have a great offense, the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. That is a potential option. But my number one option, and I keep saying it because I'm just pushing it into the ether, praying to God that the Vikings do not franchise Darnold, but they're going to. But if they don't, and maybe we sign him, we take the Kevin O'Connell offense in the form of Josh McCown, who is the quarterback's coach for the Minnesota Vikings. We steal him from the Vikings with Sam Darnold, pair him with Mike Vrabel. Now you've got a great defensive mind with a potential great offensive mind, and the quarterback who's leading the Minnesota Vikings to potentially the 1 seed in the NFC. Again, I'm going to make a video breaking down other head coaching candidates. There's also rumors out there that Mike Vrabel might want to go to the Ohio State where he played. But if Vrabel ends up being the head coach of the Raiders, I'm going to be the most happy I've been in a long time with a coaching hire. I was iffy on Gruden. I did like Josh McDaniels, I can't lie to you. And I did like Antonio Pierce. And we tried all three of these things. Now let's go get a proven commodity. Bill Belichick was fired from his first job. Andy Reid was fired from his first job. I'm not saying that Vrabel is going to become those two guys, but I'm not saying he's not. And in this division with Sean Payton and Harbaugh and Andy Reid, you need someone who's going to lay down the law and change this culture. You can't be a best friend to the players. You got to be a coach. You got to play hard-hitting, physical football. And Antonio Pierce, he talks that game, but the team doesn't look like it. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And he doesn't coach like it either. And we'll get to that in a second. But Mike Vrabel is my choice, and we got to find a good OC to pair with him. Okay. So I want to talk about AP for a second because there's reports about him potentially getting another year if we win a couple of these games at the end of the season, which makes just no sense to me. But before I do that, patreon.com/ALLaBorde Raiders. Link is in the description below. You don't even have to sign up, but just go check it out. If you're thinking, man, I'd like to support this channel further, I mean, my goal is to try to make this my day job one day, and we're inching closer and closer to that moment. But for right now, if you want to check out the Patreon, $5 a month, and you can cancel at any time, you get an executive producer credit like all these beautiful people. You get videos like this days in advance. I'm recording this on the 28th. It's not going up till the 29th. You get exclusive content like me breaking down Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward and Drew Aller. That was a waste because he's coming back. And I think I'm going to add another quarterback to break down very soon here because this guy might be the guy after all. And exclusive content, which I just talked about. And you get, bonus coverage. You get behind the scenes. You get access to things you do not get access to on YouTube. And then if you upgrade that membership to $10 a month, you get every video I post ad-free, and you get a monthly YouTube advice show where I teach you kind of how to make your own channel based on what I'm doing. So if you're interested in all that, the link in the description below, patreon.com/ALLaBorde Raiders. We just hit 25 members. Who is going to be the 30th member? Is it going to be you? We'll find out. Antonio Pierce potentially getting another year. I saw a report that said, now look, the buzz around him getting another year is not good. It's not great. Diana Rossini's been all over that it's not looking great for AP. I did see, though, and I don't even feel like looking up where this was. It was like a legit source. I think I read it on Bleacher Report. That said, if the team looks good the last few games, it might buy Antonio Pierce another year. How does... And again, I don't mean to dunk on AP, but how does us playing well against the Jags and the Saints and the Chargers, who might have the 1 seed or whatever seed they are wrapped up and rest a bunch of people, how does that factor into him getting another year? We've had 12, 13, 14, 15 games worth of material to judge him on, positive and negative. And now if we win a couple meaningless games at the end of the season, that might buy him another year. Now, I'm not saying that Mark Davis thinks like that and that's what's happening. I'm saying that the people who are saying that, I don't believe them. I don't think there are credible reports out there. I do think his fate is sealed right now. Whether he keeps the job or whether he doesn't, I think Mark Davis has made up his mind. If I had to put money on it today, and I keep going back and forth on this, but if I had to put money on it today, I would say he does not keep his job. The only way I see him keeping his job is if the past report that I just read about Vrabel going to the Patriots is true, which means that Ben Johnson would probably go to the Bears, and then you're left with who? Liam Cohen, which is a decent option. Aaron Glenn. I don't think you want to do another defensive-minded head coach who hasn't had experience yet, like a Vrabel. So I don't know who else you would go after. There's not a bunch of college guys to pick from. And I understand not firing somebody if you have no options, right? But if you do believe you can sway Vrabel or Ben Johnson, there is no universe, AP, where you're keeping your job. It just is what it is. And I don't blame it all on you. but some of the coaching tactics that you've employed and your decisions to go for it or not go for it and the way you use your timeouts, I'm not going to talk about it in length right now because I know one of my viewer comments from last week discusses it, which is when I will talk about it. So make sure you're getting those comments in for next week's or next episode. It's just not been good. And I thought because he hired Marvin Lewis and Joe Philbin that they would help him out. And it just looks like there's too many cooks. And this experiment of hiring AP full-time, in my opinion, has crashed and burned. And it's not great. And I didn't love the report coming out of the players-only meeting or it was players and coaches. And it wasn't like the McDaniels one where they were all yelling at each other, but they told AP, like, this isn't working the way you're running these things. That's not a recipe for success. And then early on, he's liking Instagram posts or tweets about Devontae playing for another team. It's like, dude, you're not in high school. Why are you liking that shit? That bothered me so much. Even if you're right about Devontae and he's a prick, you're the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, dude. That's not going to fly with me. Mike Vrabel wouldn't do that. I don't think Aaron Glenn would do that. So from that moment on, I've been really iffy and wary of Antonio Pierce keeping this job at all. You can convince me that a lot of this hasn't been his fault, but look, if there are better options out there, you got to upgrade. It just is what it is. And I'll talk more about him when we get to the viewer comments. But let's talk about, I almost just went into that song that you're thinking of. I'm not going to do that. We're going to get into quarterbacks right now. Now, after we beat the Jags last week, right? And it was like World War III in the Raiders Discord and Bleacher Report and everywhere. It was like, oh my God, poverty franchise. We beat the Jags. Mark Davis was apparently in the locker room having a great old time. He was yucking it up. He was dapping people up. Clearly did not care at all that we won a meaningless football game. Now, is he putting on a brave face? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think he's the type to do that. Like, from the reports that came out, I think Vic Tafur said, like, he looked extremely happy. And that made me think, and there are reports, you know, these are like iffy sources, so I don't really put a lot of stock in this. This is a cold, hard rumor, a hot rumor. There are reports that no matter what, we're trading up for a quarterback. I'm starting to believe that, especially with that reaction. It made me think like, oh, he doesn't care where we're picking. We'd be picking 32. We're trading up for quarterback. It doesn't matter. Now, I just said Mark Davis, and I've said before, he's a very hands-off owner. He gives you the keys to the castle, and he goes, do your bidding. He hasn't been great at hiring people so far. I do think Tom Telesco has been his best hire in a long time. And I do think last year, Telesco tried to trade up for a quarterback, whether that was Jaden Daniels or Penix or whoever, Bo Nix. And I think maybe there was a deal in place with somebody. And he showed it to Mark Davis, and Mark Davis was like, what do you think? And Telesco was like, well, if Bowers falls to us, I do think drafting Bowers now and getting a quarterback in the future would be better than trading all our assets to draft a Penix who has a spotty injury history or a Bo Nix who doesn't have elite athleticism and risking it all and being wrong, and then now you don't have any first-round picks for the next 4 years. So I think Mark Davis, as the hands-off owner that he is, this is all theory and speculation, was like, okay, Tom Telesco, do your thing. We don't need a quarterback right now. Fast forward to right now, we're 3-13 or whatever it is, or 3-12. Brock Bowers is great. So Telesco was right about that. He's awesome. But now it's time to make a move. Whether that is trading for a quarterback, signing one to a lot of money, or trading up for one. And I do think Mark Davis is now like, all right, Tom, I let you take Brock Bowers. Now it's time for me to be the hands-on owner, and you're trading up no matter what. Now, you might like that. You might not. But I've pulled up an article here, and it is the history of trading up for quarterbacks because either it works or it doesn't. There's no like, it was kind of, no. It's either really, really good or like destroys your franchise. Going back to 2016, the Rams traded up from 15-1 to take Jared Goff. The Titans received the 15th overall pick number 43 in that draft, pick number 45 in that draft, which ended up being Derrick Henry. And then, were there any other first? The number 5 overall pick in 2027, and then a 3rd-round pick in 2027, Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith. That's a weird trade to judge because Jared Goff ended up being a really good player who played in the Super Bowl for the Rams, but they ended up trading off Goff to get to Stafford to win a Super Bowl. So you could say the Rams technically won that trade. It's a very weird one, but I would say they got that right in trading up for Jared Goff. The Browns, no, we're not going to talk about that. The Chiefs land generational talent in Patrick Mahomes. They went from 27 to 10, and that was the Buffalo Bills who made that choice. The Bills received the 27th pick, which ended up being Tre'Davious White, pretty good. Number 91 overall selection in 2027. And then the first round pick that the Chiefs had the following season. That obviously was a smash success. Bears in 2017 traded up for Mitchell Trubisky. They went from 3 to 2. Now, that was one spot that they moved up. That was Trubisky and Solomon Thomas. Just a bad draft overall. Let's see what they had to give up. The 49ers received the third pick in the draft. Then 67th overall pick in 2027. The 111th overall pick in 2027. And the number 70 overall pick in 2028. That ended up being Fred Warner. I would say the 49ers won that trade. Cardinals traded up for Josh Rosen using our pick. I didn't realize that we were the team that traded with them. That's very interesting. We traded back. They took Josh Rosen. We got their pick, which ended up being Colton Miller. Great job. The number 79 pick, which we traded, and the number 152 pick that was also traded. Obviously, we won that pick. So you're seeing right now, it's either boom or bust. The Bills traded up for Josh Allen. I'm just going to rapid fire these. The Jets traded up for Sam Darnold. Maybe was the right pick, the right move there, but he's not on the Jets anymore. But the last three have been not great. Bears traded up for Justin Fields. That did not work. 49ers traded up for Trey Lance. That was god-awful. And Carolina traded up with Chicago to take Bryce Young. At the time, it was weird. A couple months ago, that was a really bad move. Now it's like, is he better than C.J. Stroud? I don't know. My point in going down the rabbit hole of history there is that it is very risky to trade up. However, I do believe in Tom Telesco. Because I've said, I'm not going to go down his history of what he's done with quarterbacks in the draft in the past. If you know, you know. If we make a move, even if Mark Davis is lightly shoving him in a specific direction, him being Tom Telesco, I believe ultimately it will be the right move. Now, who are we trading up for is the question. We will get into that in the Around the NFL section in a second. We're going to hop into the Saints game right now. We're going to beat the Saints, right? I mean, Derek Carr's not playing. Alvin Kamara's not playing. Who's their best weapon? Foster Moreau? Javonte Williams? Their defense is terrible. Their offense is worse. I don't know how we lose this game, which means we fall to what? 9? I mean, we'll see what happens with other teams that are ahead of us. But they have zero weapons. All Aiden has to do is manage the football game. The only thing that could maybe get in Aiden's head is the home field advantage, because no matter how bad the Saints are, they're going to sell that thing out, and it's going to be loud. And it's 10 a.m. body clock, which doesn't help us either, right? I just don't foresee a world in which they beat us. Now, I am hoping that we lose the game, right? I'm not rooting for us. That's weird to say. I'm not. When I watch the game, I want the Raiders to do well, right? And like I said, we're trading up no matter what, it feels like. So, unless we can get a Sam Darnold. So, look, I got Brock Bowers at fantasy. I need him to go off. And I want to see Aiden play well because, again, he could be our backup next year. Or, again, there's that doomsday scenario in which we run it back with him. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to spend too much time on this game. Again, I just feel like we have the advantage in every facet, in every phase of this game, and I don't know how we lose it. Tell me if I'm wrong. Now, if Aiden has a couple of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers interceptions in him, this could get weird, and maybe Spencer Rattler has a career game. We've been known to give quarterbacks who are terrible career games. So it can get weird fast. We're 1.5-point favorites in New Orleans, which means we are really 3 or 4.5-point favorites because you get 3 points just for being at home. It's a little betting advice for you there. Yeah, I don't see us losing this game, but you never know. Keep an eye out for Scott Turner to get creative. AP's coaching for his life. If we beat them like 60-0, like we did with the Chargers, maybe he keeps the job. But again, I don't see how these games mean anything if Mike Vrabel is knocking on your door and calling Tom Brady and being like, "Yo, when are you gonna fire AP? I'm your next head coach, right?" Let's go around the NFL. Now, I just watched this Bengals Broncos game, and this actually is going to relate to the Raiders. And I'm watching Bo Nix, and I'm like, I don't know if he's ever going to be a top 10 quarterback, but he's not bad, especially with the lack of weapons the Broncos have. They got some sneaky decent players like Mims and Sutton, but they don't have like a true number one. They don't have like a dynamic running back. They've got people out there who I've never even heard of before, and he's very smart, and he's accurate with the football, and he can run around. Now, he might have choked the game away late with that interception. It is what it is. He made some plays. No doubt about it. Now, he wasn't high on anybody's draft board. I didn't even look at him coming out last year. I didn't think there was any chance in hell he'd be a first-round pick, and he was. So, with that being said, Jaxon Dart, he just declared for the 2025 NFL Draft. He didn't have to, but he did. That means that he thinks, that his agent thinks, that his parents think, that Lane Kiffin thinks, there's a chance where he can get drafted higher or drafted in a spot that he's comfortable with rather than coming back and playing again and trying to, be in that Drew Aller, Arch Manning draft if Arch comes out. Because right now I don't know of any quarterbacks coming out next year that are going to be that great, right? It's very interesting that he declared right now. Now, apparently he's a great kid, high character, religious family, whatever. He's got some decent athleticism, and he's got a decent arm. He's highly accurate, and in the right system, he can be good. And I'm reading an article about him on Bleacher Report. Is it Bleacher Report? I think Bleacher Report compared him to Carson Wentz, which is interesting. A little less athletic Carson Wentz. But there was another, I think it was CBS Sports article that I read that compared him to Bo Nix. Now, we're in a division where Bo Nix just beat us twice. And I think if you had a do-over and I said, hey, Raiders, would you rather the Broncos have Bo Nix or rather us have Bo Nix? I think we, at this point, rather have Bo Nix. So if Jaxon Dart is comparable to Bo Nix, I think there's a real chance that we'd be looking to take him, maybe not with our first pick, unless we fall to like 11, but somewhere in the second round, trade back into the first, get it. Maybe you draft Genty with your first pick, trade back into the first with that Jets pick. Thank you, Jets. And you take Jaxon Dart. So you have Genty and Dart. Or you go Abdul Carter and Jaxon Dart. And then you have your Khalil Mack and Derek Carr combo like it's 2014. Right? 11 years ago. That's insane. The reason I bring up Jaxon Dart being linked to us is because Hondo Carpenter subtweeted, whether it was Adam Schefter or whoever, saying that Jaxon Dart is declaring for the NFL Draft. And he said, this is a big deal or this is huge. He is mentioning, I guess, or suggesting that we are linked to Jaxon Dart. So I would just say maybe brush up on your Jaxon Dart highlight film. I'm going to break him down and put that on Patreon soon here. He wasn't on my radar before. But every time I look up, I feel like he's just kicking somebody's ass. And he's playing in the SEC. They were a game away from making the college football playoff. It's just someone to keep tabs on, right? Derek Carr didn't end up being the best player in the world, but he played about as well as you expect a second-round pick to play. He was a franchise quarterback for a lot of his tenure, and he's got MVP votes, right? Jaxon Dart is in more of the zeitgeist than Derek Carr was in 2014. So I think there's a real possibility that somebody like a Jaxon Dart could end up in the silver and black on draft day. Maybe not on day one, but on day two for sure. So I'm just throwing that out there. Speaking of the Bengals and the Broncos game, T. Higgins had over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. Really angered me because I went up against him in my fantasy championship, so I will lose that, unfortunately. This guy needs to be a Raider. I can't even imagine. Just try to close your eyes. If we're picking 10th overall and we pick Genty, okay, so now Genty's your running back. Brock Bowers is your tight end. T. Higgins is your number 1 with Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker. Michael Mayer's your backup tight end. That is an offense to be reckoned with. I know the quarterback's important, but that could be something special. Joe Burrow in that game late was not looking for Jamar Chase. He was looking for T. Higgins, and he must be signed to the Raiders any means necessary. Now, what did I say before? This podcast is going to have a through line. Us versus the Patriots. The Patriots have reportedly fallen in love with this guy and are willing to throw anything at him. And if we pull up the cap space for the Patriots and the Raiders, it's very similar, as I'm reading it right here. In active cap space, the Patriots are the number one team in the league, $132 million. Number two, right under them, is the Raiders, $111 million. We have a little more dead cap than them. We'll see what happens with the Gardner Minshew of it all. Maybe we'll get Max Crosby to restructure. We'll see what happens. All that to say, we got to make sure we land this guy because it's really hard to draft the next great wideout. It's even harder to draft the next great tight end, which we've done. I don't think we're going to take McMillan or whatever his name is out of Arizona. In my humble opinion, you got to go after T. Higgins. And if it means letting one of these guys like a Nate Hobbs walk to get him, I'm sorry, Nate, I love you. T. Higgins is a difference maker. He's a big body. He's got elite hands. He runs very good routes for a vertical deep threat. He has to be your number one wideout, and I would throw up if the Patriots landed Mike Vrabel and T. Higgins, because that's the two people that I most want in this offseason. Don't even get me started with pairing him with Sam Darnold. It's that time, folks. Viewer comments. If you want your comments read, you know what to freaking do. Comment. Now, we do not highlight the hyperbolic. We highlight the passionate for sure, but not the hyperbolic. So don't try to get crazy here. Just tell me your opinions. Like Joe Glisson 9502. Every time I read these, I'm like, am I reading like a double entendre or something? First of all, he commented Saturday Night, which is the movie recommendation I gave you. And if you make it to the end of this video, I'm going to recommend you something else, and then you're going to comment it so I could see if you made it to the end of the video. I'm not saying that because he made it to the end of the video, I'm reading his comment, but I'm not saying that. Joe says Saturday Night, and then comma, AP needs to go solely based on his in-game decisions. He literally makes the wrong call every time he opens his mouth. I don't like saying this. I wanted him to work out and have continuity. But we would be wasting a year if we keep him. His mistakes will not improve in one off season. It's how he views the game. And this is what I wanted to talk about with the timeouts and the going for it. He likes to give off this persona like he's Dan Campbell. But when we're like, it's like 4th and 2 at the 50. He's like, punt. Dude, you're 2-12. And you're coaching this game like it's game 6 of the NBA Finals and it's win or go home. I do not like having a coach who has the vibrato of we're going to take what we want and then punt all the time. It drives me insane. Now, I don't want you to be Dan Campbell and go for a 4th and 7 in the NFC Championship and cost your team a chance at the Super Bowl, but take a chance every now and again. It makes me think sometimes that he's throwing the games. And then the timeout situation is horrific and it's horrendous. I'm not going to go down the laundry list of every time he's made a mistake, but it's really bad. There are multiple times where he's wasted a timeout to get the defense in the right position, and then in the next play, there's been like a wide open touchdown. So you just wasted a timeout, and then you run the clock out, and then we go to halftime. His decision-making has been piss poor, Joe. I couldn't agree more, and I'm really tired of watching it. Okay, Ronald Morgan, 7632, commented. This is a long one, but I'm going to read it. If they didn't have all the injuries to key players, they would probably have won more games. If they didn't, this reads like a haiku, by the way. If they hadn't started Minshew, they probably would have won more games. If they hadn't hired Getsy, they probably would have won more games. The questions are, did AP cost them games? Did not having Aiden O'Connell start the entire season cost them games? One must look at every loss and analyze it. If they had won more games, we wouldn't be gnashing our teeth about not having the number one pick. The truth is, the Raiders have enough talent to win more games. So having the 6th pick, and then in parentheses, or even the 10th if they win out, is not indicative of the talent level. I agree wholeheartedly. If they think that giving up a bunch of picks is worth it to get Sanders a Ward, then fine. If they don't, then hopefully they draft a QB to develop and draft someone in the draft. There's a lot here. But ultimately, if Aiden O'Connell not starting was on Antonio Pierce, he cost this team at least 3 to 5 more wins. And I think, and I highlighted this last episode, we're lucky to have the 6th pick. Because again, if you look at the injuries that took place, Malcolm Kuntz was supposed to have a big year. Christian Wilkins, Epps, Ja'Cory Bennett, Nate Hobbs, right? Alexander Madison, Zamir White. Devontae got hurt and didn't play a couple games. Aiden O'Connell got hurt. I didn't even say Max Crosby yet. Like the laundry list of people that got hurt. This is like an 8-ish win roster. So having whatever pick we have, you have to look at it in complete context of how the season went. And I agree with him. If they think giving up a bunch of picks is worth it to get Sanders a Ward, then so be it. I think that's well said by Ronald. I don't have much to say about that because I feel like I've been saying the same thing for multiple weeks now, and I couldn't agree more. Great comment. Second HS Productions says, and this is not hyperbolic, but it is passionate. To be 100% honest, if I were Tom Telesco, I'd trade Max for a haul of picks. There's no denying Max plays hard, but let's be real. What impact does he really have on any given game? I get he was hurt this year and probably last. But what about when we made the playoffs? What impact did he have? Does he impact the game like JJ or Miles or either Bosa brothers? So I'm thinking JJ Watt, Miles, or either Bosa brothers. One could argue that Jaxon had more of an impact on games than Max. Don't agree with that. We're going to move on from that. It's like, bro, Max was the only one that was on AP or trade, and now he's not happy with it. GTFO, go to Detroit. Passionate, not hyperbolic. Look, I said something similar to this. I don't remember what game that was. Maybe the Steeler game. But Max Crosby is a great defensive tackle. I would say maybe even elite. He is not Myles Garrett. He's not TJ Watt. He does not have the impact of a Hall of Fame level Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor. And that's okay. Would I trade him? No, I would not. This person would. That's okay. We're allowed to have a difference of opinion. But when I said he had a bad game against the Steelers, or maybe it wasn't the Steelers, he had a bad game and he doesn't impact the game like TJ Watt, people came at my head like he's criticism proof. Max Crosby is a top 15 player in the National Football League. That doesn't mean he's a top 5 player. And it's okay to admit that. Now, was this year fair to him? Not really. He got hurt, and also Wilkins and Kuntz both got hurt. And I think next year with Wilkins and Kuntz back, if they sign him, if they draft an Abdul Carter, I do think the defensive line is going to look a lot better. And he's going to have a better season because he's not going to get double-teamed all the time. But TJ Watt's double-teamed all the time, and he still impacts the game and changes the outcome of the game. Max Crosby at this stage in his career does not do that. That's just a fact. It just is what it is. I love Max. My dog's name literally is Crosby. But he's not criticism-proof. Nobody's above the shield. Passionate, not hyperbolic. Okay. I think that's going to be it for me. That was fun. A lot to discuss there. Make sure you're commenting because I'm going to read them in the next podcast. Make sure you are hitting the like button and check out the Discord. Link is in the description below. It's a group chat. We're all going to be talking during the game tomorrow. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Oh, recommendation. So what did I do? I did a music recommendation. I did a movie recommendation. What can I recommend now? Marvel Rivals, the video game. I'm not a big Overwatch kind of guy, but if you tell me that it's Overwatch, but I could be Spider-Man, I mean, it's free, a la Fortnite. I mean, there's microtransactions for like Battle Pass or whatever. get a bunch of friends, go play Marvel Rivals. It's an absolute blast. It's pretty easy to learn. There's characters that are higher difficulties than other. Spider-Man's a 5-star difficulty, but I'm still kicking people's asses with them. It is what it is. Marvel Rivals is my suggestion to you. Last but not least, join that Patreon, and please be sure to subscribe. It's free after all, no charge to you. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.